Hi, Shannon Waller here, and welcome to Inside Strategic Coach with my friend and partner, Dan Sullivan. Dan, last Inside Strategic Coach, we did a two-part series on the Scary Times Success Manual, which has been incredibly well received, been circulated everywhere. A whole bunch of people have asked if they had permission to forward it, which of course they do. Even Ben Hardy yesterday told me that it's been opened 10,000 times by his readership, which was a pretty cool thing. And what I'm really excited about is as part of this, we're turning this into a series, is we're actually going to do a deep dive into every single one of the strategies, which I think is really exciting. So this is number one of the Scary Time Success Manual strategies, which is forget about yourself and focus on others. So I think this is a really important one. And you really talk about how people can respond creatively, as opposed to any other way, when kind of scary times or big bad things happen. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah. So I think scary times, whatever form it comes in, Shannon, it could be personal. It could be just something that's happening to you and not happening to anyone else. Or it could be small group. It could be big group. And as we found, it could be worldwide. Mm-hmm. In the case of the virus and the various lockdowns and shutdowns that happen. So it shocks the system because it's not life as normal. And what I've found is it's your response to the initial shock that really makes the difference. And I'm going to use the word response as opposed to the word reaction, because everybody has a tendency to react to it, that something's being done to you. But the word response simply means, yes, that initial shock has happened to you. And as a result of it, you're using it as an opportunity to do something creative, do something positive. And the fastest way to do that is not worry about yourself, but actually say, in this situation, how can I be helpful? How can I be useful to other people? And tough muscle. I mean, this is a skill, and it's a very tough skill, because as we can see from this current time, people who are actually elected to be leaders are reacting, they're not responding. Those in the news media who we would expect to be cool, calm, and collected are not being cool, calm, and collected. They're adding their own, what I would say, panty reaction to the panty reactions that are already being experienced by their audience. So they're not really being helpful and they're not really being useful right here. I wrote this, as I mentioned, in our two-part when we did the overview. This was written within the first 2 weeks after 9/11, and that was shocking. Commercial jets flying into office buildings, killing everybody on the jets, and then above a certain level, killing everybody who was in the very, very skyscrapers in New York. You just think about the situation, and it's shocking even almost 2 decades after. It's scary to think about it. I had a lot of clients in the New York area, strategic coach clients, and they really got hammered. So we decided as soon as it was possible to do it, we would go to New York, we'd put on a special seminar, and we took the 10 strategies of the Scary Time Success Manual. It was the first time we brought it out. We hadn't brought it out before then. We read through the 10 strategies, and then we had a worksheet where they could actually take each of the strategies and apply it to themselves. And it was a big hit. And then it got spread out through the networks then. You're thinking close to 20 years ago. So we didn't have the capabilities that we have now to get this type of message out really quickly.
It's true. On that point, Dan, one of the things that you talk about is that this first strategy really enables you to transform your own immediate shock into a wake-up call that your best first step in any scary time situations is to direct your time, attention, talent, and resources to helping specific other people who may be more shocked than you are. So that's not what the news media and some of the government people are doing, but it is what you're doing, and it is what we're doing, and it's also what our clients and community can be doing too.
Yeah, we have 2 words in the strategy that you forget any, actually, people except the ones that you can actually help, and you forget yourself. You're being a first responder here, in your own immediate circle. And then you focus. So each of these strategies is a focusing strategy. And you just go down the list of who are the people that I can actually help specifically, who's in the immediate range of what I can do. So for the first couple weeks after 9/11, we had a lot of communication with our clients. And then we zeroed in because we were just getting a lot of upset from the New York area. And we said, let's go to New York. Let's take our team to go to New York. And, it was actually about 3 weeks after when we actually had our meeting, and they really appreciated it. People had all sorts of stories to tell, and they got to tell each other the stories, and they got to talk to each other, and it was really great. But that was something specific we could do. And then what was really interesting about that first one, and then we'll get into some of the strategies that I recommend for that first response. And I'll talk about what happens to people when they just keep reacting rather than responding, Shannon. But it was very, very interesting. In Chicago, I was doing workshops that day. Adrian Duffy, one of our other coaches, was coaching in the other room. So we had 100 mostly out-of-town individuals who had come to Strategic Coach that day. So we just announced that in a very short period of time, they had to make a decision whether they were going to be at the workshop for the rest of the day and then sort themselves out, or they were now going to take steps to actually go home, and we were going to help them. So our staff was really, really busy for about the first 4 or 5 hours, just getting everyone transportation and in some cases hotels, where they could get hotel space. It was interesting. The Toronto staff didn't have workshops that day, and they were all watching this on TV, and they were much more impacted in a negative way. They weren't busy helping other people. The real interesting, if you're really busy helping other people, the Scary Times event doesn't have the same impact on you because you're in motion. You're actually responding, but if you're just watching it on TV, you're just reacting. And fortunately, I never saw any of it until I got home at around 10 o'clock that night. And they had already censored some of the more grueling scenes, death scenes. So I didn't really have a chance to react because I simply had, as the coach that day, I simply had to respond. I had to coach all day that workshop. And I remember I had a discussion group that evening. And I went to the discussion group. This was a book discussion group. The individuals, for the most part, weren't really engaged that day. And I just noticed that they were much, much more scared. I wasn't really scared. I was tired, but I wasn't scared.
That's a really valuable point. I mean, that's a great example of focusing on others, and forget about yourself. So that was very true. And I was in Toronto, and we did have the TV on where I know you had said to the team in Chicago, take that away. There's something about when you're able to be practically useful to somebody else. And what is interesting, what I really love, some of the stories that are coming out right now with COVID-19 is how people are helping their neighbors get groceries. And I have a bunch of people, this is end of March break week at the moment, from Saturday, Sunday at the past weekend, and friends have come home from traveling, not allowed to go into grocery stores. They have to quarantine for 14 days, and their neighbors are going and getting them food and of course toilet paper. Let's not forget that. But when you can be helpful for someone else, I just connected with our team about doing some goal planning, which was lovely to think a year out. We're going to talk about a short-term focus too, but we'll readjust our goals in the short term, but we still actually do have a future. You made that point in one of our last conversations about that. But before we move on, one of the keys here, what you said, is helping specific other people. And you talk about this a lot with our clientele. Don't get seduced into wanting to, serve everyone. Is it practically useful for one person? Make sure that you can do that. And I think in this situation, it's flipped a bit, but how can you be useful to a single type of person, your clientele, your family, your team, those that rather than some big generality?
Yeah, just on another notion of that, we have lots of events in life. Someone dies, or there's an accident, or, they're just going through a difficult time. And there's a standard thing which drives me crazy when I hear it. They said, anything you can think of that I can do for you, just let me know. So here's the thing. The person's already burdened down with the negative experience. But now they've got to use their time to think of how to make you useful. You're asking them in this situation to be responsible for making you useful. And I said,
Right.
yeah, it really doesn't work. It's not a great thing. And so what I always say, is there one thing I could do for you today that would be useful for you? And it's usually along the lines, could you pick up my dry cleaning? I'm not going to be able to get my dry. I said, sure, get the ticket, go out, pick up the dry cleaning and bring it back, and said, okay, is there something for tomorrow that I could do? And then you can just proceed day by day by day and do one important thing. And usually, since you've given them the formula, they'll do that to other people.
Right.
Up until that point, they've just been, everything's coming at them. But the moment you break the spell, if you will, you break the spell and you say, look, the only people who are going to be useful to you are the people who do one specific thing, complete it, come back, get another one. And I think being specific really, really is very important during scary times.
Well, I remember you using that example. What makes me think of it, this is phenomenal coaching for your team in terms of how they reach out to the clients. Like, is there one thing we could do for you right now that would put your mind at ease, would help you, would assist you? Obviously, it's going to be within the realm of whatever your business is. And it's usually way smaller than what you're imagining or maybe even dreading. But people need kind of really simple things sometimes to have them feel calmer or more confident about the future. So really just tapping into that, I think that's actually a great piece of team coaching, Dan, that people can pick up on. Now, before we jump into your 5 strategies, which are stellar, let's talk about the alternative if people are not proactive, if they do not, well, the current term is lean in, but they don't overcome the shock. What happens then, Dan? What happens when people are kind of at the effect of something and reacting rather than responding?
Well, you go negative. I mean, you have a choice. You're going to go negative. And that's just react, react, react. So you start doubling down on your reactions. And what I notice is that people start making up stories which come under the category of conspiracy. I think the reason why this happened was so-and-so, and they're planning this. They're actually using this disaster to do something else. And I said, oh my gosh, don't do this. You know, first of all, in the best of times, thinking about conspiracies doesn't get you anywhere because there's no way of telling the truth or the falsity about what you're talking about, but you're spreading rumors, you know, and you're burdening other people by doing that. And so I cut back and really supervise that I don't say negative things during this period of time because it's almost like an infection. So I praise a lot and, you know, I try to inject humor into the situation. I try to make things funny because humor is a tremendous relaxant and it shifts people's thinking. They find something really funny. You can make fun about little things, but the entire thing is the longer you go and not responding to the situation, the more you're going to be probably disabled by the situation of being useful, being helpful during that period of time. And it's an individual decision, you know. And the other thing is that it's voluntary. It's voluntary. You can be a hero or you can be a load in the situation, and it's up to you. So, you know, I've grown up with a real instinct towards being a hero. So situations like this, I said, well, what's the hero do today? What are the specific things this hero called Dan, what's he do today? And they're usually small things, they're specific things. But the one thing I don't want to do during the day is add one bit to anyone else's negative feelings. I don't want to pass on germs, if you will, negative germs.
You just actually helped put words around one of the things I appreciate about you so much. It's why being in partnership with you, Dan, and all the different creative endeavors that we have is so enjoyable and joyful because you're incredibly acknowledging, you're very appreciative, you don't add any negativity. And it's kind of funny, if someone does come in with negativity, I actually find that a shock to my system and I'm like, go away. You know, I'm like, don't add to it and don't be one of those people that just regurgitates back what you've heard without any internal processing, especially of negativity, because it's destructive. And I'm not going to say it's worse than the virus, but it's in some cases easily as bad, because only a certain percentage of people will get this, but the rest of us can be infected with the fear, and that is incredibly detrimental.
I mean, there's some people who are kind of experts from a medical standpoint, and they say your immune system is very much affected by your mental state. You can actually become susceptible to physical negativity, trauma or infection and everything. These are physical aspects. But your mental state, your emotional state, your psychological state has a great deal to do with whether you are immune or susceptible during this period of time. People get sick, with natural disasters and deaths and accidents and everything else. They can get very, very sick because their immune system drops so much. They're feeling so negative. And then if other people around them are not being positive, then it adds to the load. So one of the first things I can do to focus on others is to focus positively on others.
Ooh, I love that addition. Dan, let's jump into the strategies, because I'm sure that people
these are sub-strategies. So this
sub-strategies. Sorry, yes.
These are actually action steps.
I was going to say, they are actions, which is really exciting. And you know me, I always love to get to the practical. How can people do this? Well, the next 5 things we're going to talk about are what are the 5 ways that you can take action to put this into play. And Dan, I love that you've delineated these. This is new thinking, everyone. So this is something you haven't heard before. So Dan, let's jump into number 1, make your future the next 24 hours. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, and I've been doing that ever since we made the decision not to have our normal business structure, which is workshops for entrepreneurs. So more or less, we're being away from that for 2.5 months. So I said, okay, so I can't think about those 2.5 months because that decision has already been made. So what I have is 2.5 months of time that's different from what I thought it was going to be. And I think the best way of doing this is just take it a day at a time, respond to suggestions on the part of Babs, who's my partner, and the key team players, here being one of them, Shannon, of what I could do using my skills, which are fundamentally communication skills. What could I do? It's very, very interesting. I've just taken it one day at a time so far. We're in our second week of being in a new situation. And I said, well, whatever future I was thinking about before that I was going to be doing in late March, all of April and May, well, that future's gone. So I'm just going to create the future, a new future, and I'm going to do it 24 hours at a time. And it's amazing because every day that I've done this, things have surprised me from a positive standpoint, of getting a last minute call. Hey, could you do a podcast with so-and-so right away? And you got 45 minutes to prepare for it. And I said, absolutely, I can do that. We have the technology. I'm in a position where I could do it. And I notice I've done a good job. I do a review at the end of every day, and I pick out 5 things that really work for the day. And usually 2 or 3 of them are better than what I was expecting the day to be. And then things that didn't work, like I could have been more efficient or I wasn't prepared in the right way. So overnight and early the next morning, I prepare myself better. And I've noticed my skill level has gotten better every day. And because of my individual skill multiplied by technology, I'm actually impacting on a lot of people, but certainly specifically the people who ask me to be useful in this way. They're very happy with what I'm doing. And I'm keeping my schedule kind of loose so that if something comes up, then I can respond to it very, very quickly. And the whole point is just be as useful as I can every single day and see if tomorrow I can be more useful than I was today.
That's perfect. And just a proof of that was last Thursday morning, I had the idea to have you do a video because I know people wanted to hear from you as to what your thoughts were with what was going on. And I pitched it to our leadership group at 9:15. And then you and I were recording at 11, which was really cool. I think I sent you a fast filter, and we did that, and it was great. And the other thing that you have written for me is what you want to do is provide the greatest practical and emotional value to specific individuals you know. And I love that you're about providing both the practical and the emotional. I think that's a lovely nuance. You were just talking about adding positivity, and you can be a hero or you can be a load or a burden. Adding to the emotional well-being of people, especially in fearful times, I think is super key. Now, you've talked about this a smidge before, but it always bears repeating. Sleep, eat, and exercise. And you are keeping yourself really physically healthy, which supports your mental and emotional health. And you have some brilliant routines, Dan. I love them.
Yeah, well, the big thing for me is sleep. I call it the shutdown leap. We're going to be shut down in certain ways, and we're going to take a big leap in other ways. So I put a name on this particular scary times. I'm calling it the shutdown leap because the world is kind of shutting down in a lot of ways that, it's kind of very, very different. But I'm going to use this period to actually take a leap. But the big thing is every single day, I'm going to make sure I get my 8 hours because I'm an 8-hour-a-night guy. And I clear my mind before I go to bed at night so I don't have to spend the night working things out. And then we're very good about eating, and we've got a lot stored up. That's good food, and we have access to really good food during this period of time. And the other thing is exercise. Exercise, because the big problem with scary times is the increase in cortisol in your system. And cortisol is the worry, nervous, anxiety drug. Okay, this is take your blood pressure up kind of drug. And the one thing that's a sure bet for burning off cortisol is exercise, where you sweat and where you actually have resistance. So I do resistance weightlifting and I do sprinting on an elliptical machine. We have also the benefit, I have a sauna. So I'm taking saunas, and actually saunas are terrific because the thing that kills virus is your body getting heated up. Perspiration and higher than normal temperature actually kills off infection. So it's been really great for us, but most people can sleep, so sleep. Most people can arrange their food, so eat properly, and then exercise. And walking is great. If you can get out and just walk, that's really great. And we're just switching into spring. So, it's feeling like spring. So that's actually a real benefit right now. But getting outside is really important. Getting sunlight is really important. Feeling nature is really, really important because those all cut down on our cortisol levels and we feel more dopamine. That's what we want, is more dopamine.
We want the good drugs, not the bad drugs.
Yeah. And I make sure that during each 24-hour period, I can check off the list for sleep, exercise, and eat. I've done that so far. And, as part of our forward planning where you have to make arrangements so that during the next 24 hours, everything is set. So that's really great.
Dan, one of your points here is that you at your daily best will be 10 times more useful to other people who may not be able to do any of these three things, or at least not consistently. It really is focused on taking care of yourself so that you can take really good care of others. And I've been super impressed with the creativity, in terms of people having, classes that they used to go to are now online. There's a cajillion workouts. My daughter's been running like crazy outside because of the weather, because it's gotten so much nicer. So the number of resources available online to help you get motivated if you need someone to kick your butt a little bit, as my other daughter says. There's someone out there who would love nothing more than to create value for you this way. So, vitamin D, get outside if you can, but then also if you're indoors, online, Zoom, everything, which is kind of powerful. So I think and a lot of people actually I've been talking to are getting more rest. They're finally sleeping more. I get more sleep because they don't have their commuting time. And then also really enjoying some of their social connections online while they're physically distancing. So I think we can make the best of it if we have that mindset. Dan, you then talk about your being useful schedule. So what does that look like for you? Or what does that look like for other people?
Yeah, it's the next 24 hours, but it's being useful in the next 24 hours. So, on average, I've had about 4 projects, which involve other people, either actually involve them at the time or immediately after I have to complete something, so someone is in better position to actually do something because I've done something first. So I have my normal schedule, like if I look at my normal schedule before this started, and it was scheduled in a particular way, but that schedule is gone, actually, except for one project, which is an ongoing book where I'm working with a team. Every single activity I'm doing now is actually something that's emerged because of the special times, because of the scary times. So I just make sure that everything around these 3 or 4 events during the day, these are achievements that I have to make during the day, that I'm at my most useful. My head is clear, I'm very focused. In most situations, I want to think them through so that I don't have to think them through while I'm doing it, that I'm actually responding. But being useful is a kind of a lifetime theme for me. And I think it has a little bit to do with my childhood, actually, because I'm a 5th child in a family of 7 children. And I always jokingly say to people, well, what does being 5th tell you? And I said, well, first of all, you're not number 1, you're not number 2, you're not number 3, you're not number 4, plus you have 2 parents, so you're you're actually number 7. And I said, so a lot of normal roles that people might have in childhood, I had to go searching how I could be useful, and I did. I just kind of was very, very observant about what would be helpful or useful to someone else. Grew up on a farm family, so I was the houseboy. The older 4 worked out in the fields, sweet corn, string beans, field tomatoes. But I would take snacks to them. I would, take water to them and come back up. And then with my mother, I would wash dishes. I would set tables. And then the real skill is, even before I was like 5 years old, I learned how to make beds, and I could make beds. And so I make my own bed, which was a big deal for me. Gradually, I said, I can make everybody else's bed too. And so I became really terrific person. And to this day, I tell you, Shannon, I cannot get up and leave the bedroom unless the bed is made. There's something psychologically wrong with my world if I've walked out of the bedroom and the bed isn't made. So I developed that. But I think it's tied, the activity of making the bed is actually deeply, deeply anchored in that being useful.
Dan, you're also really good at setting tables when I've stayed with you. So those skills have kept.
And during this time, we have help around the house normally because we're working all day. So we have housekeepers, we have, other people who help out around the house, but they're sequestered just like everybody else. So the only place where I do things like laundry and I wash all the dishes and I sweep and I take out is when I'm at the cottage. So I've just switched over to cottage guy. I said, you like the cottage guy? I tell Babs, you like the cottage guy today? How's the cottage guy doing? Is it good cottage guy? But it's just being useful. The normal garbage pickups are happening in the city of Toronto normally. So I was the one who wheeled out, it was recyclable week. So recyclables went out and I made sure that they were where they were. Now I have to go out and get the container after the podcast here, and I'm going to put it back in the garage where it should be. But, there's lots of things, and you think of them as you go, this thing being useful. But one of the big things that's really useful is I'm being especially clear on how the other person on the other end can be useful to me. So I'm giving very, very clear directions about how I want things to be, and kind of explaining why what we're doing is such a big deal and why it's so important. And it's got a real special impact during this time. So I think I'm going out of my way just to be useful in my communication right now.
And the other thing, Dan, in terms of being useful, and you also talk about in terms of helping other people gain greater clarity, confidence, and capability, is you have been very available for what I wanted, what the team wanted, what our clients are looking for. You've met with some of our top level clients. So it really feels like it is actually kind of nice to be able to come up with an idea and be able to execute on it so quickly, because normally there's a million other things in the calendar. It has to fit like 6 weeks down the road. Now it's like, other than our book project, it's refreshing. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to say, what wasn't possible before? How can I be useful to my audience? And then designing your schedule around being useful is a cool way to think about that. Now, your next point is one of my favorites, which is really tracking your winning achievements for today. So how can people put this habit or this action into place, Dan?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, only undertake projects where you really have a choice on it. Only undertake projects that can actually begin, be completed, and are finished today, so that nothing carries over. What I tried not is do not have projects that are incomplete that carry overnight. I would say generally during normal times, I make that a point because, first of all, I'm ADD. And one of the most important things for ADD people to keep their spirits up is to actually have a lot of short-term projects that can be completed very, very quickly and completely. So they're not loaded up with a lot of incomplete projects going overnight. But I think it's very, very important during these days to actually stick to that rule.
I think it's a great rule. And one of the ways that I noticed that you do this and I do this, oh, by the way, a great piece of ADD coaching I heard was do it now or do it never. So the do it now rule is completely synchronous with what you just said. And, you'll take a big project like a book, but it's broken up into pieces. So we'll do record number 1, and you'll get the fast filters or the mindset scorecard done for that particular recording session. So that recording session gets a checkbox and it's done, or check mark. And then you'll do the same thing. Or if you're, meeting with Hamish and you get the next diagram cartoon figured out, you also have the ability to take a pretty big, complex 3-month project and break it into these sprints that you can do in 24 hours so that you keep that sense of high progress and momentum. And then you track these winning achievements as a win. You don't wait until the end. When it's over, you count every single step towards that goal as progress. And I think that's a really important thing, especially when there's so much uncertainty, is to really get it down. Your 24 hours perspective is genius to what can I get done in 24 hours, and then check that box off, because that's very fulfilling.
I call it chunking. You really chunk things down during periods like this. And the other reason is that digitally I'm very, very connected, but physically Babs and I are alone. And my sense is that the chunking and getting things done creates a sense of momentum that makes you feel not so disconnected from other people's efforts.
Right.
And the other thing is that more and more I'm choosing as my wins that part of my project which is crucial for other people later today, or it's crucial for other people tomorrow. I get my part done so that they can get their part done. So I'm thinking about the handoffs here. It's kind of like a relay, and I'm running my 100 yards or I'm running my quarter mile and I'm handing the baton off. I think that generates a lot of shared momentum, shared enthusiasm about achievement, which is really, really crucial because the whole world is on tilt right now. Usually we don't have that experience of this. Hundreds of countries now are dealing with this problem in various stages, whether they're early to it or they're late to it and everything else, they're going through stages. So in my 75 years, this is the first one where it's being experienced worldwide. There's been some big, like 9/11 was shared news-wise, but it wasn't actually experienced, It didn't really affect other people actually from a practical standpoint. But this one is the first, what I would say, altering the practical course of daily life event that we've had in my lifetime, certainly in my lifetime.
Yeah, I think it's the first time in history, unless we're talking about an asteroid hitting the Earth or something like that.
An asteroid would
do it? That would qualify? Normally when things go tilt, it's us or it's somebody else, but never are we all going tilt at the same time. That this is
an asteroid. I think this is a big one. Yeah.
I think so
I'm not
too.
saying that ultimately it's the most dangerous one. I'm saying it's the most disruptive one.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But
certainly in anyone's lifetime.
the shock of this is the greatest shock that I've seen distributed all over the planet.
I would 100% agree with that. I love it. Very true. So after you track your winning achievements for the day, and I think it's really important to track all that progress, then you also work on win streaks. I love this. And it's so cool, Dan, because it's not perhaps the win streak that you planned for, but nevertheless, you pivoted and you've switched, and now you're on a new one, which is kind of like this interesting tilted period of time. So let's talk about win streaks. Great day, better tomorrow.
I'm just thinking of these as we're having the conversation, but if there were 3 checkoff points of what constitutes a winning day, it's that I was present during the day. In other words, I wasn't in tomorrow, I wasn't in yesterday, I lived the day in today.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing was that I was positive throughout the day. And the other thing is I was productive. So present, positive, and productive are kind of like 3 checkpoints for me. And then I add up the wins and, tell myself a little bit about them. I visualize them and I can feel my morale going up. I've got this real morale sense. And then I preview tomorrow, and some of it's already in the schedule. So I know I'm going to do those things. And then I say, well, it was a great day today. In what way could I make tomorrow better? I go to bed at night with a sense of real achievement, and I get out of bed in the morning with a real sense of anticipation and excitement. So, and it's a 24-hour loop. It's, you think about it, when people run marathons, which can last, for most people, it's 3 or 4 hours. But even the great star who, in a test marathon in Vienna, did it.
Right.
Short of 2 hours. 2 hours is still a long time, He's got 26 miles, and I'm sure he's got this chunking ability to do the next 100 yards, to do the next mile, and everything else. He doesn't get too far ahead of himself in the race,
Mm-hmm.
People who are marathon swimmers, they'll swim across, Lake Ontario here, from here to New York. And, it's a long, long time, and you've got to have a chunking ability in your mind that you're not thinking of the entire distance that you're running, but there's this I'm going to do in this half hour, this I'm going to do in this half hour. And you have other people who are giving you markers and are giving you times. I think that able to stay within the immediate present is a tremendous skill. Tomorrow's tomorrow, and we'll create tomorrow using the same approach as we did today. And we'll be better because we'll have today's experience giving us momentum going into tomorrow. The other thing is that once the day is over, the day is over. Yep. I don't try to redo a day that I've just lived.
That's powerful, Dan. Well, I think being present, positive, and productive is a great checklist for all of us, everybody. And then helping other people to be that way too, which I think there's very much how we are managing ourselves, but it's also about how can we help the other people that we're, living with, working with, supporting, serving. Yeah. How can we help them be this way too?
Yeah, and I think one of the things you can do is you can be a role model for other people. And there's what I would call a constructive role model where you're showing people how to actually get things done, and there's what I would call a corrective role model. For example, if people start complaining about how I said, yeah, let's have a special place where we take all of our complaints and we'll review those in normal times. But right now, we can't deal with the complaints. We can't deal with the criticisms. Let's just focus. I'm not negative like them. I'm not angry or anything, but I'll just cut it off. I won't lie. I said, that kind of thinking, that kind of talking is not going to do you any good. It's certainly not doing me any good. And we're not going to talk about that right now. Some people I've been on and they start talking. I said, oh, good heavens, you haven't been watching television news, have you? And they said, well, yeah. I said, oh, no. During scary times, you can't watch television news because the most scared people on the planet are the journalists. They're not saying scary things to scare you. they're just really petrified. The news media are the most unbalanced, petrified people on the planet right now. Okay. Okay. So I said, oh, no, you can't watch. I mean, watch YouTube, watch a murder mystery, watch whatever you want to do, comedy or anything, but you can't be watching. Oh, no. That's like letting the germs come into your house. You can't allow those germs to come in your house. So I don't watch that. I'm a reader and I have the internet, and usually every day there's some well thought out articles about events that are taking place, or they're comparing how this scary times compares with other scary times and what seems to have worked. And you really learn something, but the on-the-spot journalists, you learn nothing from except how scared they are.
That's a great point, Dan. And I think if you're going to keep yourself positive, present, and productive, that's actually one of the things to do is turn off the television, which means I had to go downstairs after we're done and do that. That's going on in my household right now.
It's contamination. I mean, it's a form of contamination. And it does no good. I mean, it does no good.
Well, and I think your point earlier about, and I actually said this to my friend, this is how much I travel, who's an Air Canada agent in Chicago. And he was pretty stressed in a post he made on Facebook about, worried that he's infecting other people or about to get infected. And I'm like, my friend, you just can't think that way, because fear is going to totally, take down your immune system. And then I was able to give him some stats from an article that said that a lot of the first responders, not even first responders, but people in airports and those are actually showing a lower rate of infection. So I tried to give him some good news, because he was I could feel it. He was working himself up to a state, and I care about him. I don't want him to be experiencing that. And he has a lot to give. He just has a wonderful way about him. And I'm like, thank you for helping essential people get where it is that they need to go. You're doing something that's really important. So it's interesting. We all have opportunities, big and small, to share this input and to, again, turn off the news because it's not helpful.
Yeah, and just to finish off here with the first strategy, forget about yourself, focus on others. Make it easy for others to focus on others. I think that's the big thing. You can pass this on. You can pass the spirit on. We're going to find more so than ever in history how unified the planet can get in scary times. And it isn't hundreds of thousands, it isn't millions. There's now billions of people who will be doing positive, productive things by operating in the present of each day. And this, again, is also, I think, a historic first, where we have this sense of teamwork in the billions. Teamwork in the billions. That's the first time we've had teamwork in the billions.
I think I want to take that idea and explore it further, Dan. That's pretty exciting. Well, it's true. And the first time we've ever been so globally connected. In one of our other conversations, you said, in some ways, we'll be more global. And it was because of, technology, internet, and our means of communicating, and then other ways much more local. But the teamwork in the billions is a very cool idea. I'm going to look forward to that in a future conversation that we have. So Dan, thank you for our deep dive into Scary Times Success Manual Strategy number 1. Forget about yourself and focus on others. And I really love the 5 action steps. Just to recap: make your future the next 24 hours, sleep, eat, and exercise. Keep yourself physically well so that you can be well in all the other ways. Have your schedule be about being useful. I think that's a phenomenal way to reorganize your time. Really track your winning achievements for today and go on a win streak. Great day, better tomorrow. And if you're not aware, we have a win streak app that is completely free for iOS and Android. And this is a way where you can actually track your 3 wins for the day and what you want your 3 wins to be for tomorrow. And be prepared to be surprised by even better things that happen that you weren't planning for. So I want to make sure everyone knows about that resource as well. Dan, thank you as always for a fun, inspiring, positive conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shannon.